I remember the Easter mornings of my childhood. Yes, there was an egg hunt and some chocolate. But what I remember most clearly were the new white gloves, the new white woven purse and matching hat, and the white socks. I recall that those were very exciting. On those Easter mornings, my family would go to church, and I wore socks instead of tights. I wore a lightweight pastel coat and a new hat and purse. It felt so exciting, so liberating. Gone were the heavy winter garments, replaced by the brighter and lighter spring wear. As I recall, Easter Sunday was the first Sunday when my younger brother was able to wear his tartan dress shorts for the first time each season. We were pretty fancy people, really. As my family left the house, there was no mistaking it. We believed that spring had arrived. But of course, we know that here in Southern Ontario, that astrological spring doesn't always correspond to meteorological spring. It was just a few years ago that I had an inch or so of snow on my front yard on April 21st. I read that backwards, hopefully. Our climate stop and start springtime reality didn't dampen the Thompson family's eager embrace of the season, though. Easter was the day when we started acting and dressing, at least on Sunday mornings, like spring had arrived. For many of us, Easter is synonymous with spring. Many traditional Easter traditions seem to firmly root it as a celebration of spring. Rabbits, our story this morning, are an ancient symbol of fertility, and it's hard to argue with that. The Easter bunny seems to have come to this continent in the 1700s via Germany. Eggs, too, are a logical symbol of fertility and rebirth. The which came first, the chicken, or in this case, the Easter egg, riddle reaffirms our understanding of the cyclical nature of life. Chocolate and candy were delicious additions to the celebrations Christians added. After a long winter and the Lenten season of dietary restrictions, one can understand the impulse. The English word Easter, it is argued, comes from the name of an Anglo-Saxon goddess of spring and fertility, Ostra. East, the root of the word, is where each new day begins, the seeming source of the sun. The story in the Christian scriptures on the death of Jesus requires a springtime connection. In Matthew 26, verses 18 and 19, Jesus directs his disciples to make arrangements with an acquaintance, sending the message, "I'm going to celebrate the Passover with my disciples at your house." So the disciples did as Jesus had directed them, and they prepared the Passover. The story of the death of Jesus is clearly linked to the Jewish celebration of Passover. Passover always happens in the spring, in the days and weeks following the equinox. Therefore, the Christian Easter observances must always happen after the spring equinox. In the early Christian church, the festival which celebrates Jesus rising from the dead was not as fixed with the seasons as it is now. It was always near Passover. But the formula we use today was standardized in 325 in the Common Era. Easter, in case you didn't know, always falls on the first Sunday after the first full moon after the equinox. Passover and Easter are only two of the spring festivals, modern and ancient, that humans have observed. That feeling and the excitement I had as a child, so happy to celebrate the beginning of spring, is one that seems universal. Spring is good. The stories vary across traditions, but there's always an element of new beginnings and new possibilities in the mix. Passover celebrates liberation from slavery. Easter, the rebirth of a savior, one who will save and liberate us. In the Thai Spring Water Festival, the streets and the people in them are washed clean. Holi from northern India is a festival of color, timed with the emerging colors of the spring. A Central Asian spring celebration starts, as does Passover, with a thorough cleaning of homes. I sometimes wonder if my assertion that I'm happy to live in this climate because I'd missed the seasons is completely honest. If I'm truly honest, I think I'd refine the statement and tell you that this climate is worth it, because what I'd really miss is spring. Winter makes spring all the sweeter. Gerard Manley Hopkins, Victorian poet and Jesuit priest, wrote, "Nothing is so beautiful as spring, when weeds in wheels shoot long and lovely lush. Thrush's eggs look like little low heavens, and thrush through the winding timber does so rise and ring." Hopkins got it. Spring is exquisite. Candy, rabbits, a risen Jesus, meals designed to remind us of an escape from slavery, each of these, along with stories and customs from other traditions, fits with the seasons. That which seemed dead is actually alive. Crocuses and snowdrops are bringing color to the garden. The willow trees are showing a blush of green. At the core, this season and its celebrations are about promise, potential, and hope. I find it exhilarating. The season is about hope. Alleluia. But if we focus too much on the alleluia, on the rabbits and the colored eggs and the flowers, it can begin to seem a bit too simplistic, too cheerful. The reason we find spring thrilling, the reason the Passover story and the Easter story are so important and compelling for so many, is that they represent hope and promise that comes after some real and at times crushing hardships. Winter is no joking matter. Even in our modern times with heating systems and electricity, people struggle. Some find the dark days almost overwhelmingly depressing. Snowstorms still bring real challenges. Passover is a story of a thrilling escape from the crushing reality of slavery. Jesus lives, but he was captured and executed and then rose again. Stories of hope have meaning when they're contrasted with the challenges that precede the happy ending. I sometimes wonder if hope has, by its definition, a requirement that it follows brokenness. Hope is what we do even when it sometimes seems difficult to imagine. Hope isn't a given. And I know there are times when it seems so very difficult to muster. Hope, at the core of the seasonal stories and the spring image, is something we need to cultivate. I was talking to a friend the other day. He was feeling down. Their family's beloved dog had died, and a good friend was facing a difficult diagnosis. He'd reacted to a situation with a coworker in a way that had left him disappointed in himself. He found the news, as clearly so many of us do, profoundly unsettling. We've all had similar days when it just seems too much. Sometimes it seems like we can't even imagine a path to hope. I did what I think I should always do when someone's telling me about a hard story or a hard time. I listened. I told them that I understood things were hard. I told them I loved him and I can't fix it for him. I can't make it feel better. Maybe, though, by acknowledging the hurt and the brokenness, I made it possible for him to feel a little less alone, and maybe to find something, perhaps a faint glimmer of possibility, that could help him find his way back to a more hopeful place. The Christian Easter might be something that used to hold meaning for you, as it did for me. I certainly don't understand the story in the way I used to, but when I consider the symbolism in it and the message in it, it can still hold real meaning for me. The tomb was empty. What's really remarkable about the story, fact or myth, accurate or inaccurate, true or false, is that it is a story about what wasn't found. The tomb was empty. The story isn't about death, it's about life. It's my belief that life, the choice to live and hope, is the point of it all. That choice for a life that puts us in better relationship with ourselves, with others, and the world is the point of it all. So what does a Unitarian Universalist Easter look like? Angela referred to our varied understandings of it a bit this morning. Is there a place for rabbits and Jesus in our exploration of Easter? The answer, of course, is yes, there is, if you want there to be. The truth is we have no official teaching or understanding about a theology of Easter, resurrection, or any other element found in those teachings or those from any other faith tradition. At one point in time, Unitarian Universalism was a Christian tradition. And for those early Unitarians and Universalists, the Easter story would have been understood differently than it is for many of us today. Christian stories and traditions are still an important lens for many of us, but they aren't as central and they're not required. So where does that leave us? Well, I can't speak for you, but for me, the kid who wore her new socks and hat to the Presbyterian Sunday school of her childhood, I still find much of value in the Easter story. Easter is, at its core, a story of life. It's a story of life in spite of tragedy. As the Christian scriptures describe it, the days leading up to Easter are dark. Betrayal, persecution, public humiliation, execution. It doesn't get much darker. Easter doesn't deny the hard and sometimes brutal realities of our world. It suggests that our task is to find a way in spite of it. Layered on ancient spring festivals and the Jewish narrative of liberation, we are invited to consider what restoration might look like. It seems to me the contemporary message, the compelling direction that comes from Easter and the Passover stories is that we all have a story to repair the world, to bring life and redemption back. The questions for me are, what can you do here, now, and today to embody hope? And what steps can you take to liberate yourself and others? And so I invite us all to take a breath and ask ourselves, what can I do to bring some hope, some good news? The season invites us to shake off the chains that bind us to old ways of being and set a new course, perhaps a new approach, a new purpose, and a new understanding of who we are. Each year, we are encouraged to hunt for the sweet morsels and to savor them, to find new and improbable forms for being present. A renewed relationship or a new beginning is probably more likely than a rabbit who delivers chocolate eggs. Why should we deny possibilities? I know hope isn't easy. I know it isn't cheap. I know that for some of us, because of our current reality, it is at least for now out of reach. And that's okay. That's why we do this together. Maybe today you need to rest and I need to do the work of looking for hope. Hope looks easy from the outside, but it isn't. It can be elusive. It's hard. It costs us something. It demands something of us. I consciously work to find ways to feel hopeful, and some days it's hard work. And there's much in the world to make us think at times that hope is just folly. And if I'm honest, sometimes I think maybe it is. But I'm not sure that I can live that way. I think there is something in us, a natural impulse that keeps reminding us to choose life, to kick back the stone of the tomb, to gather the unleavened bread, and find a way to keep going. What does your search for hope look like? What makes your heart gladden? A walk on a cold morning, listening for birdsong? A new resolve for kindness, for tenderness? Knowing that someone is speaking up for the disenfranchised. Finding spring on a day when an unwelcome frost finds its way into our neighborhoods or our hearts. Seeing someone show up with what is needed to be present to others. We do all of these things and more because hope and Easter and Passover and all of the spring business requires it of us. Hope doesn't guarantee an outcome. Part of the Easter story is of women who went to the tomb because they loved the man who had died, not because they thought he was going to be risen, but because their tradition told them it was a way to show respect. They went with heavy hearts because it was the thing to do, and they found life in the process. I can relate to that. Can you? There are times when I've done something, not because I thought my actions or choices would help. Well, and sometimes my actions and choices have helped, and sometimes they haven't. We hope and we do the hopeful thing because we can, and because not doing it ensures that it's not going to get better. Each year, the magnolia by our front door blooms because that is what it does, beautifully. Exquisite pink flowers. And with some frequency in the days after the blooming, cold, wet snow falls, blankets the flowers and turns them brown. And this morning, I've been noticing this week, this morning it's getting ready again. The fuzzy buds are starting to swell. They're flowers in waiting. And I do what I do most years, I check the long-range forecast. Does it look hopeful? Does it not? There is some snow in the next few days, but I think they're still tight enough. I hope that the disappointing end won't be realized this year. I do some worrying for my magnolia because it can't. It's not its job to say, hey, maybe we shouldn't bother. This year, this didn't turn out so well last time. Even if it could hesitate or hold off, even if it could withhold the lovely pink, it wouldn't. It's not in its nature. We know because we have seen the hard stories, because we've lived a few years, that things don't always turn out beautifully. Rabbits, pretty flowers, and chocolate eggs and a happy ending aren't the whole story. An empty tomb isn't the whole story. Liberated people isn't the whole story. But they all represent the possibility. And because I've seen the hard stories, I've lived some of them, and because I've lived a few years, I know something else too. I know that the possibility for a happy ending doesn't exist unless we encourage it along. Our job is to do what we can to cultivate hope, even when we can't know if the story will end well or not. Sometimes it will end badly. Heartache and tragedy are real. But that reality doesn't mean we've failed. The willingness to see the world with soft eyes, with compassion, is real too. The ability to dare to hope, to look for wonder, to hope is real. Today, I'm going to keep my eyes open for chocolate eggs, for green shoots in the garden, for an empty tomb. And I'm going to do what I can to live with the promise and hopefulness of Easter. Alleluia. Happy Passover. Happy Easter. Let us take a few moments in silent reflection.